Do you believe that there are forces that quietly enter your life without being invited? Some nights, the footsteps you hear aren't from someone in the house, but from a past that hasn't been buried. Be careful what you bring with you when you move. What haunts you may not stay in the old house. Welcome to Whisper Horror Channel, where nightmares aren't just told, but relived through every word. If you love stories of spiritual horror, supernatural phenomena, and chilling mysteries that give you goosebumps, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and share your most terrifying experience in the comments below this video. Now, turn off the lights. Put on your headphones. And let's venture into a nightmare called The Whisper of the Unseen. My family moved into this house in early spring. It's a quiet residential neighborhood in a northern Wisconsin suburb, where the air always smells of damp earth and pine. Where every morning you can hear birds chirping mixed with the wind blowing through faded wooden fences. My name is Harlan McCree, I'm 42 years old. And I'm a manager for a regional insurance company. My wife, Emily, is an elementary school teacher. We have 2 kids, Caleb, 14, and Nina, 11. My little family had lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Milwaukee for almost a decade, a place where everything was cramped, noisy, and there wasn't even a yard for the kids to play in. When Caleb started getting taller than me, and Nina kept complaining that he snores like a monster, Emily and I knew it was time to find a new place. A real house. A proper home, where everyone in the family had their own space, and most importantly, a new beginning. We found this house after 3 months of scouring real estate listings. It's an old-style 2-story house, built in the 1960s, with 4 bedrooms, a large front yard, and a deep basement that I plan to turn into a rec room or a quiet workspace. The asking price was surprisingly cheap compared to the market. The real estate agent said the previous owner moved out suddenly for personal reasons. And the house had been vacant for over 8 months. I should have been suspicious. But when I first stepped inside, I was immediately sold by the light pouring in through the vintage windows. The faint smell of old wood in the air, and the strangely peaceful silence. It was like it was calling to me. We moved in on a drizzly day. The light rain made everything damp and chilly. But the kids were excited to explore every nook and cranny. Caleb chose the room at the end of the second-floor hallway. And Nina insisted on the small room near the stairs because it's brighter there. Emily was busy cleaning the kitchen. And I was in charge of organizing things in the basement, a place that had been abandoned for a long time, but the floor was still solid, dry, and wind-tight. I found an old metal shelf against the wall, with a few dusty, sealed cardboard boxes on top. I was about to open them, but Nina's voice interrupted me, "Dad." Caleb took my pillow. I laughed, put the boxes aside, and went upstairs. That seemed unimportant. But later, I wished I had opened that box on the very first day. The first week went pretty smoothly. Even with a few boxes left unpacked and a Wi-Fi signal that flickered like a dying flashlight, my whole family was happy. The first dinner in the new house was hastily bought pizza. Eaten right on the living room floor, and Emily teared up when she saw Caleb smile, a smile he hadn't had for over a year. I thought everything would be good. But then, a few strange things started happening, small things, just enough for me to brush them off and tell myself it was just because of the new environment. First, it was the sounds. At night, after everyone had turned off the lights and gone to bed, would often hear light footsteps on the second-floor hardwood. At first, I thought it was Caleb or Nina going to the bathroom. But when I tiptoed out of the room, the hallway was completely empty. Both kids were fast asleep. I checked all the windows and doors. Everything was still locked. There were no signs of a break-in. Maybe the old hardwood floors creak with changes in temperature, I thought. The next thing happened in the basement. One Wednesday morning, I went down to get a toolbox and found the metal shelf had been pushed aside, clearly not from an earthquake or a cat jumping. I also noticed a long scratch on the concrete floor, extending from the corner of the room to the bottom of the stairs. At that moment, a chill ran down my spine, not because the basement was cold, but because I remembered very clearly that I had locked the basement door the night before. I started paying more attention. Every morning, in the kitchen, the chairs around the dining table were often moved in a strange way, as if someone had been sitting around the table and got up before dawn. One time, I even saw a glass with water already poured, sitting neatly next to the sink, even though I was sure I had washed and put everything away the night before. Emily, on the other hand, started having trouble sleeping. She said she would wake up at exactly 3:17 a.m., down to the minute, because she heard a breathing sound right next to her ear. When she opened her eyes, no one was there. I was still asleep. Caleb and Nina were in their own rooms. I don't believe in the supernatural, but gradually, the fatigue and the tense atmosphere made me think. I decided not to tell the kids. I didn't want to scare them or make them imagine things. But then Caleb came to me. One evening after dinner, he hesitated before saying, "Dad, someone keeps taking pictures of me when I'm sleeping." I thought he was joking, but Caleb showed me his phone. In the photo gallery was a picture, blurry, with a yellowish tint, of Caleb lying asleep, taken from the head of the bed. He insisted, I didn't take it. Mom didn't either. My phone is locked with my fingerprint. My heart sank. There was something wrong with the photo. Not because it was blurry, but because in the bottom left corner, there was a shadow. A dark, blurry streak standing upright, with no face. No details. But clearly a human figure. I wanted to believe it was a photo glitch, a reflection, or even a prank. But Caleb swore he never sent the photo to anyone, and didn't remember turning on his phone. I couldn't sleep peacefully anymore. 3 days after the strange photo on Caleb's phone, I decided to do a simple thing: check the entire basement again. I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in the risk of intruders, or even hidden cameras. This house had at least 2 previous owners before we moved in. The real estate agent briefly mentioned the previous owner moved out in a hurry, leaving many of their belongings behind. I had never checked it properly. That afternoon, while Emily took the kids to the supermarket, I brought a flashlight, a camera, and a utility knife down to the basement. This house's basement has an L-shaped structure, with one section separated by an old wooden partition. I used to think it was just for storage. But this time, when I looked closely, I realized there was a small door at the far corner, blocked by 2 heavy wooden shelves. I moved everything aside. It was a white-painted wooden door, almost blending into the wall because the paint was peeling. There was no doorknob, just a frame nailed shut with rusty iron nails. I used a crowbar to pry it open. Inside was a small room, only about 4 square meters, with no windows, a cold concrete floor, and gray-black walls. And in the middle of the room was an old wooden box, wrapped in rope and sealed with a faded red wax seal. My heart started pounding. For some reason, I was scared, not because of the box, but because it looked exactly like the kind of box people use to lock something up. Not to keep it, but to prevent it from escaping. I untied the rope and opened the lid. Inside was a pile of old-style photos, film prints. I took them out one by one. They were all photos of sleeping children, taken from various angles and positions, in different rooms. But their eyes and postures were chillingly similar. They looked like Caleb. So much so that I thought I was seeing my own son, repeated in every photo, in completely unrelated settings. Underneath the photos was a notebook, filled with scrawled handwriting. It doesn't appear if you look directly. It only leaves traces on photos. Don't let her sleep alone. It whispers when everyone is asleep. I can hear its voice, in the walls. I felt a shiver run through me. A cold wind blew through a crack in the wooden wall, from nowhere. I closed the box and walked out, but as I turned, I heard a whisper. The voice was very small, like a breath right next to my ear. Don't let him close the door. I spun around. The room was empty. No one was there. I ran up the stairs, trying to control my rapid breathing. My heart was pounding like a war drum. When I got to the kitchen, I saw Emily and the kids were back. Caleb was clutching his stomach, his face pale. Emily said, he said someone touched him during his nap. I pressed for details, and Caleb just replied, "It wasn't a real person, Dad. It had claws. It didn't look at me straight. It smiled with its mouth, but it had no teeth." I hugged my son. For the first time in my life. I felt useless and powerless in the face of something I couldn't explain. That evening, after putting Caleb to bed, I quietly set up a small infrared camera in the corner of his room. I didn't tell Emily. I didn't tell her about the photo box either. She was already exhausted from moving in her new job. I didn't want to add to her worries. At least, that's what I told myself. The camera was set to record continuously from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. I inserted the memory card, set it to auto-record, and turned off the lights. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, opened my laptop, and waited for the video to record. Every fiber of my being was on high alert, as if something was about to happen. 2:03 a.m. I saw Caleb turn over, pulling the blanket up to his chest. 2:17, the room was still silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. 2:29, at first, I thought the recording glitched, because the image flickered. As if a layer of static was passing across the screen. But then, a shadow appeared in the frame. No clear face. No specific shape. Just a darker streak of shadow. Standing in the bottom right corner of Caleb's bed, right where the camera didn't fully capture. It didn't move. It didn't get closer. It didn't turn its head. It just stood there. As if it had been there since before the camera was turned on. Then, Caleb started to whisper in his sleep. Not dreaming, but repeating a phrase like he was hypnotized. I don't want to listen anymore. I don't want to remember. The shadow tilted its head, and then, it vanished. It didn't walk out of the frame. It faded away like smoke, as if it had never existed. I stopped the playback, rewound, zoomed in, and adjusted the brightness. Not a single pixel was corrupted. The camera was still working fine. I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, after dropping Caleb off at school, I went back to check the camera, and this time, I decided to check our bedroom. I always had a feeling the bedroom mirror was placed in the wrong direction. It faced the door directly, and every time I walked in, I always felt like something was watching me from behind the mirror, not just my reflection. I took the mirror off the wall. Behind the wood was a small hollow space, and inside was a round hole like a camera lens. I shined my flashlight in. There were wires. And a small device, an old industrial-style camera. No longer working. But more importantly, on the back of the mirror, someone had carved words with a sharp nail, in crooked lines. It doesn't reflect a shape. It reflects a memory. I saw myself, before I was born. Don't look into its eyes. I put the mirror back. This time, I covered it with a dark cloth. That afternoon, Emily came home early. And I decided to tell her everything. She wasn't angry. She wasn't terrified. Just pensive. Then Emily said, "When I was at the supermarket with Haley a few days ago, she said something strange. She said, 'Mommy, I remember this place. I went to this supermarket with that lady before.' I asked, 'Which lady?' And she replied, 'She doesn't have hair. But she's not a bad person. She taught me how to whisper.'" Emily squeezed my hand. "Do you think this house isn't just haunted by something? But it's also teaching the kids?" I didn't answer. But in my heart, a belief was growing clearer. Someone, or something, was living in the house's memory. And it was learning how to invade the minds of every family member. Little by little. That night, for the first time since we moved in, the whole family ate dinner in silence. Caleb ate slower than usual, his eyes constantly looking at the stairs. Haley rested her chin on her hand, mumbling something as if talking to someone else. Emily and I exchanged glances. Neither of us said a word, because we both started to feel something was quietly taking over this house. That night, I had a dream. In my dream, I was standing in the basement, where I had first opened the door when we moved in. But this time, it wasn't surrounded by cold concrete walls. It had become an old wooden room, with dozens of black and white photos hanging haphazardly on the walls. There were no clear faces in the photos. Just blurry figures. As if someone had deliberately blurred them or they had never fully existed. In the middle of the room was a desk, and on it, a round mirror, very similar to the one I had removed from our bedroom. I walked closer. In the mirror, I didn't see myself. I saw Caleb standing right behind me. But it wasn't the current Caleb. He was older, about 14, with a pale face and lifeless eyes. He whispered in a voice that wasn't his own, "You still don't remember, do you? This house wasn't chosen randomly." I woke up, drenched in a cold sweat. The next morning, Emily was already sitting at the dining table, her face pale. "I dreamed about the basement too," she whispered. "But in my dream, I was locked in there. There was a man standing outside. He kept repeating, 'You can't leave until you remember your name.'" I swallowed, my hand trembling slightly. And I also dreamed about the basement. But it was a different version. I saw Caleb. He spoke as if he had lived here before us. Emily stood up, walked to the filing cabinet. She took out an old folder of documents we received from the real estate company when we bought the house. We never really looked at the old records, did we?" she said. "We just glanced and signed the contract." I nodded. "And then, we opened the folder together." On the back of the basement blueprint was a faint handwritten note: "Don't break the third-floor door. Don't leave the children alone. Don't mention the name. Rebecca." I looked at Emily. "Rebecca?" "We never heard that name during the entire buying process." Emily turned another page. It was a copy of the transfer deed from 1988. The last owner was a woman named Rebecca Harland. And the terrifying part was, the photo attached to the document was of the same bald woman Haley had described. I quickly checked the camera in Caleb's room from the night before. At 2:17 a.m. The camera had automatically turned off for 6 seconds without any manual command. When it turned back on, Caleb wasn't in bed, but there was no footage of him leaving the room. I rushed upstairs. Caleb was still sleeping. But on his forehead was a blurry black smudge, like a pencil mark, something I couldn't make out. I tried to wipe it, but it wouldn't come off. And then I realized. The smudge formed a symbol. A letter. A curved R as in Rebecca. Emily stood behind me, breathing heavily. "Do you feel like someone is using the kids to record memories?" I didn't answer. But I knew one thing was becoming clear: a cycle of memory was swirling deep inside everyone in this house. That very morning, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. Emily took Caleb and Haley to her mother's house over an hour away, and I went back to the house, alone. My goal was clear: I had to find the true history of this house. I went to the town library, where they kept copies of land records and old reports. The librarian was a gray-haired woman named Margaret, who had lived there her whole life. She was a bit surprised when I gave her the address. Then frowned. "Oh, the house at the end of Hazelwood Road? That one was vacant for over 30 years. Are you new here?" I nodded, trying to stay calm. "Could you help me check the previous owner's name? I'm looking for some information related to the house's history." Margaret nodded, then started pulling out old, yellowed files. And then the name appeared. Rebecca Harland, the sole owner for over 20 years. But the terrifying part wasn't there. It was in a small black and white newspaper article, in the short news section. Woman suspected of mental illness goes missing after strange basement fire. March, 1989. Local police have not yet found the body of Ms. Rebecca Harland after her home's basement unexpectedly caught fire in the middle of the night. The house was not severely damaged, but the basement was sealed off for investigation. Neighbors reported hearing screams and children's voices in her house, even though she lived alone and had no children. She was a specialist in teaching autistic children but was forced to quit due to strange behaviors, like making her students stand still for hours just to listen to the whisper from the wall. I shuddered. The whisper from the wall, just like Haley had said on the first night. I asked Margaret if she knew anything else. The old woman stared at me. There was a rumor that Rebecca wasn't crazy. She was just haunted by something. People said she tried to lock a spirit in the basement. Every night, she would go down with a lantern and read out names. As if she was taking attendance of who was alive and who was dead. I left the library with dozens of photocopies. Back at the house, I followed the old blueprint and found a small room hidden behind a brick wall at the end of the hallway. In the new blueprint, this room wasn't marked, as if someone had intentionally hidden it. I used a hammer to smash the bricks, sending dust everywhere. And then, I saw an old wooden door, with no handle, just a small slot like a mailbox. On the door, someone had scrawled in black paint. "Don't call my name. I won't stay silent if you call again." I stood there, my hands trembling. Part of me wanted to turn back. But another part, the part that had witnessed every distorted memory, every strange behavior from my children, wouldn't let me turn away. I broke down the door. Inside was a rotting wooden desk, an old cassette recorder, and hundreds of small pieces of paper folded into triangles, stacked in a tin box. I opened the first piece. "If someone reads this, remember, a name brings a soul back. Don't let children repeat it." The second piece, "Rebecca is no longer human. She keeps memories in the mirror, voices in the walls, and souls in the children." The third piece, written in a childish scrawl, "She is inside me. She speaks through my eyes." The floorboards above me creaked. Someone was walking upstairs. I knew Emily and the kids weren't here. I stood up slowly, the tin box in my hand. The air in the room suddenly turned cold as if a wind was blowing from somewhere. The tape recorder unexpectedly played a segment that had never been recorded before. "You found me. But not to save me. To continue the curse." I ran upstairs as soon as the tape ended. The house was dead quiet. Not a sound. I opened every door. The bedroom was empty. The study, too. It was only when I walked into the second-floor bathroom that I stopped. The large mirror above the sink was foggy with condensation, even though the heating had been off since last night. I walked closer. On the surface of the mirror, words slowly appeared. As if written with a wet finger, "I cannot get out." I stepped back. The words disappeared, but in their place, my reflection was still standing there, even though I had moved away from the mirror. I turned around quickly. No one was behind me. But in the mirror, I was still standing in the same spot, then slowly looked up and stared at me, with empty, pitch-black eyes. He wasn't me. I ran downstairs. I needed to get out, to take the box to the police if I had to. But the front door was locked tight. Not by a bolt, but by the wooden bars from the inside of the wall. As if the house was closing itself off. I screamed, "I know who you are. Rebecca." No one answered. But every piece of paper in the box started to tremble slightly as if caught in a breeze. I threw the box onto the table, and one piece flew out and stuck to the glass door. On it was written, "She isn't Rebecca. Rebecca was just a vessel." I don't know how long I was in a panic. But suddenly, the lights went out. The house was plunged into darkness. A faint red light shone from the family photo hanging in the living room. I walked closer. The photo had changed. It was no longer a photo of my family. Instead, it showed 4 strangers, and the girl in the middle, her head bowed, her hair covering her face. The glass on the photo was cracked with a hairline fracture, right where the girl was standing. I looked closely. Underneath the photo, a faint, embossed line of text read, "The Last Family, 1989. Rebecca's family?" No. I realized something worse. It was this exact room. And the family arrangement was identical to my family's photo. Someone was replacing my memories. I quickly pulled out my phone. No signal. But the camera still worked. I turned on video mode, pointing it at the ceiling to check. Nothing. Then I switched to selfie mode, just to check the lighting. And that's when I saw my face standing right behind me, in the camera. I spun around, no one was there. But in the video, he was still there, slowly getting closer. I threw my phone on the floor. Laughter echoed from the basement. Not loud, not urgent, but quiet, rhythmic, like a woman recounting an old story. I knew I couldn't escape physically. I needed to go back to where it all began. The small room behind the basement wall. I went downstairs, bringing the old tape recorder and flashlight. The tin box was now wide open. A brand new piece of paper lay in the middle of the box. Even though I remembered it being empty when I left. If you want it to end, call the right name. I looked around. Whose name? Rebecca's? Or the thing inside her? Then I suddenly remembered, the code etched on the back of the tape recorder, RKH 3912. I went back to the machine, turned it on, and rewound the last tape. A voice echoed. Childish. Confused. Disordered. My name is Rachel. I never wanted to stay. But they wouldn't let me leave. Rebecca kept me here. She borrowed my body. She said I had to learn to be quiet like a good child. But I never forgot the bell, it woke me up. I whispered, Rachel. The space around me vibrated like cracking metal. Rachel. I called out louder. The wall next to me cracked. A hole appeared. And inside were hundreds of papers burning one by one. A child's laughter. Then screams. I knew, if I didn't end this properly, a new loop would start with my children. I took my lighter and burned the rest of the papers in the box. The fire flared. The room shook. The eyes in the mirror vanished. The front door opened. I walked out. The tape recorder still playing one last sound, a soft sigh of relief. Since that night, my family and I left the house early the next morning. No luggage, no looking back. Only a few essentials and a reminder that I never dared to speak of. Our old house has been sealed. I didn't sell it. I didn't rent it out. I didn't go back. I just left it there. Like a scar that won't heal, but also no longer bleeds. In the following weeks, I tried to contact the previous owner, the real estate company. Any record that could provide information about Rebecca or Rachel. Nothing. It seemed no one named Rebecca Pierce had ever lived in that house. And Rachel? There were no birth records. No school registrations, no missing persons reports. The police only recorded the incident as a paranoid episode after moving stress. They found no evidence, not even the secret room behind the basement wall. The tape recorder, the only thing I kept, now only plays static whenever I turn it on. I never told my wife and kids what really happened. They know something was wrong, but I chose to remain silent. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I was afraid that if those words were spoken, something would come back. As for my daughter, since that night, she no longer dreams of the girl with black hair. Instead, she sometimes dreams of an empty mirror, and in the mirror is herself. Nothing else. Just her. I used to think things like souls, ghosts, or sealed memory loops were just fiction. Until I saw my own reflection, not in a mirror, but in my daughter's terrified eyes. A child never lies when she's scared. Since then, I have a habit of stopping in front of the mirror every morning, staring for a long time, just to make sure the person looking back is me. I don't keep any notes anymore. But sometimes, in my dreams, I find myself standing in a small room. Thousands of blank papers are floating around. And in the middle of the room, is a cracked old mirror, with a reversed message written on it. Want to leave? Remember your name first. I still remember my name. But I'm not sure if it still remembers me. Because every time someone calls me by the wrong name in public, or when a blank piece of paper unexpectedly falls out of a book I've never read, my heart races. As if something is calling me back. Or something never left. Some stories haunt us not by what we see, but by what grips us, from the dark, from behind, from places no hand should ever exist. If you think you're safe just because you're somewhere familiar, think again. Now, join Whisper Horror as we enter a new chapter, where the line between body and consciousness is torn apart by an invisible presence. A possession not born from rituals, but from biology. The third hand, a tale of something that doesn't need a door to enter. It just needs a place to grow. I live alone. But every morning I wake up, my toothbrush is wet. I don't believe in demons. Until my own hand wrote something I never thought of. There is someone else living inside me. And he is learning to control everything. My name is Mark Leland. I'm 30. I'm a crime novelist, the kind of writer who turns over every tiny detail to uncover the truth. I believe in logic, evidence, and especially the silence of science when it has nothing to say. I live alone in a small apartment in Brooklyn. A modern, tidy, and somewhat cold place, just like my mind. Everything in my life has a schedule: coffee at 7:30, writing at 9 o'clock, lunch at 12 o'clock. No girlfriend. No close friends. I talk to the characters in my head more than to real people. Perhaps it was that very solitude that kept me from realizing something was changing. At first, it was small things: a Word file opened at 3:33 in the morning. Even though I swore I had turned off my computer. My manuscript had a strange paragraph appear in it: he is hungry. He needs a body. I don't remember writing that sentence. And my toothbrush was wet every morning, even when I hadn't touched it. I laughed at myself: it's just stress. Or maybe you're too into horror stories. But then, the accident happened. One rainy morning, I woke up on the living room floor. My shirt was torn, my right hand was covered in blood. A paring knife lay on the floor at my feet. I looked around. No one was there. The door was still locked. No signs of a break-in. On the refrigerator door, carved deep into the metal, was a shaky but terrifyingly clear line: he is not me. But he remembers. He wasn't me. But he remembers. A chill went down my spine. My mind was spinning. As a writer who specializes in crime, I had never been this scared. Because I realized one thing: I wasn't living alone. I was being lived with. The headache lasted for hours after I woke up. I sat still in the living room, my eyes fixed on the words carved into the refrigerator. He is not me. But he remembers. Someone, or something, was trying to send me a message. But I couldn't understand. I wiped the blood from my hand. There were no wounds. There was no blood in the room either. The knife was clean. No signs of a struggle. No missed calls. No one knocked on the door. I checked the hallway camera. No one entered or left the apartment all night. But I had lost 6 hours of my memory. The last time I saw the clock was 11:02 p.m. The next time was 5:17 a.m. 6 hours. Blank. I searched online and found a familiar but chilling phrase: transient global amnesia. No clear cause. No cure. It usually lasts a few hours. It often comes with a feeling of helplessness. I couldn't believe a neurological condition could explain everything. Not when I found this. I opened my laptop. There was a new Word file on the desktop. It was saved at 3:33 a.m. The file name, untitled_m.docs. I opened it. Nothing was there. Just a single line, in the middle of the page. I am inside the walls. I jumped up. I looked around. The walls were still walls. Brick, cement, white paint. No cracks. No sound. I don't remember writing that sentence. But the font, the alignment, the typing style, were exactly how I formatted things every day. It used my hand to type out what it wanted to say. I locked the door. Turned off the lights. I sat in the dark with a knife in my hand. There was no one. But I felt a gaze. A look that crept along my spine. A presence, not in front of me, but inside my chest. Just as I was about to leave, the kitchen light flashed on. There was no switch sound. On the glass of the oven, in a foggy mist, a handprint appeared. It wasn't my handprint. This hand was long and slender, like a person without skin. I ran out of the apartment. Standing in the stairwell, my heart pounded like thunder. But I couldn't leave. I needed answers. And he knew. He remembered everything that I had forgotten. I started putting a camera in the bedroom. Infrared mode, recording all night long. Partly out of fear, partly because I wanted to find those blank hours. The hours I don't remember. But still, existed. The first night, nothing. The second night, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. The camera showed me lying still on the bed, as if dead, not turning, not snoring. But my right hand was moving. It jerked in rhythm, as if an invisible string was pulling each finger joint. Then my hand reached down to the edge of the bed, took the phone out of my pocket, unlocked it, and accessed the Notes app. I saw myself, in my sleep, typing on the phone, "I am hungry. Let me in." After that, the hand quietly put the phone back in its place. My whole body remained still. But my right hand was no longer mine. I took the video to a neurologist. They looked at me with skepticism. It could be a sleep-related movement disorder. One doctor said. Like focal sleepwalking. I wanted to scream. This wasn't sleepwalking. This was something else. In the following days, everything got worse. My laptop turned on automatically at 3:33 a.m., a time I was no longer a stranger to. When I checked, my new manuscript had new paragraphs I had never written. A passage about a severed hand being sewn back onto another body. The hand started typing on the keyboard by itself while the owner was asleep. It learned, it remembered. It wrote, every memory leaking from the other side. When I read those words, I felt a strange familiarity. It wasn't just the writing style, but something inside me knew exactly where that paragraph came from. And then it happened. I was in the shower. Steam fogged up the mirror. I felt my right arm go numb, as if thousands of needles were pricking it from the inside. I looked down, and I saw it, a line of words scratched into the skin of my stomach with a fingernail. "Let me in." I panicked. Running out of the bathroom, drying myself with a trembling body as if I had just escaped death. There wasn't a lot of blood, just shallow scratches. But the way the letters appeared, each line straight, not skewed, it couldn't have been accidental. The next day, another line appeared, "You promised." I never promised anything. But it seemed he remembered a promise that I had forgotten. I started to doubt my own memory. I put tape around the windows, doors, and closet. Every morning, a piece was torn off. No pry marks. No signs of a break-in. I was living in a prison with no bars, where my captor was hiding in my own body. One night, I was woken up by a light tapping. Not from the door, but from inside my chest. As if someone was tapping on my ribs from the inside, one beat at a time. I jumped up, looked in the mirror. My skin was pale. My eyes were dark and sunken. And my right hand, it no longer belonged with the rest of me. I raised my left hand, a normal reflex. But when I tried to make my right hand follow, it hesitated. It missed a beat. I tried to write. My left hand trembled but obeyed. My right hand started writing in reverse, as if writing for someone standing across from me. And then, with that very hand, I wrote 3 words on the steamy mirror. Manus mea non est. Latin, this is no longer my hand. I don't know Latin. But someone, or something inside me, knew. I no longer believed I was Mark Leland. Not completely. I was a shell, being possessed in fragments. And he didn't need to rush. He was patient, hungry, and smart. I wasn't sure if I was waking up as myself anymore. Every morning became a crime scene investigation of myself. My laptop lay open on the desk, the screen glowing in the dark. A passage was typed in the middle of the night, with my font and my voice. But it wasn't me. My right hand was living another life. I went to New York Presbyterian Hospital for a general neurological exam. I didn't say I was possessed. I'm not stupid. I talked about involuntary movements, disrupted consciousness, and sleep movement disorders. They gave me an MRI. The doctor looked at me after seeing the images, his eyes a little narrowed. "There's something a bit strange," he said. "We found an unusual electrical pulse region in the left motor cortex, the area that controls the right arm. It doesn't match any known injury. It's like a separate command line is running there." I asked, "Do you mean, as if a separate entity is controlling my right hand?" The doctor smiled, a smile used to end a conversation. "That's just a figure of speech. But if you really believe that, I recommend seeing a psychiatrist." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat and stared at my right hand under the yellow light, as if facing a strange creature attached to my body. I tried to tie my arm down with cloth tape, binding it tightly to the chair. At exactly 3:33 a.m., I started to feel sleepy, but not in a natural way. My eyelids drooped as if they were weighted with lead. My consciousness was sucked into a dark space. But my ears could still hear the struggling sound of the tape. And then I heard writing. Not on paper, but on my skin. When I woke up the next morning, my entire left side of my stomach was covered in small lines of writing. You promised. I am starving. I can be mercy. Or I can be fire. I took a picture with my phone and sent it to the only person I trusted, my former college professor, Ellis Grant, who specialized in ancient languages and religious psychology. We met at a coffee shop near Columbia. When he saw the photos, Professor Grant frowned, then looked at me for a long time. This, he whispered, isn't just possession. This is the language of ancient entities, where words don't just describe reality, they create reality. I was speechless. Do you know what manus peccatoris means? I shook my head. The sinner's hand. In some ancient beliefs, it was believed that a cursed spirit could hide in a body part, often the hand, and take over the body through it. It starts with actions. With motions. With writing things down. That night, I looked through all my old notes. I searched my first manuscript, my student notebooks. An old piece of paper fell out of a brown leather notebook, Malachi. The one who writes through flesh. That name. Malachi. I had heard it before. But where? My memory flickered like a candle. A man. A voice reading the Bible. A bloody hand placed on my forehead as a child. My father. I started dreaming of him. But in the dream, his face wasn't clear. Only his arm was scorched from the elbow down to the wrist. He whispered to me in a low voice that seemed to come from the earth, manus peccatoris. Malachi is not the demon. He is the deal. I woke up with my heart pounding like a drum. Sweat drenched the sheets. But what chilled me was the new line that appeared on the bathroom mirror, in a shaky handwriting like a child learning to write. I remember now. Malachi wasn't just a name. He was a buried memory. And now, as I was starting to remember, he was getting stronger. No longer just shaky letters. No longer just disjointed movements. But a complete will, with a goal, with its own voice, a voice that didn't come from my mouth, but echoed from my own nervous system. It's a strange truth. The human brain can lock away memories it doesn't want to remember. As if it builds a wall, cements it over, and labels it, "Do not open." I was a skeptic. Believing that memory was simply electricity and reflexes. But when Malachi started to leak, not with words, but with my own memories, I knew a part of my childhood had been buried too deep. And now, it was surfacing. I went back to my old house in Rhinebeck, where I lived until I was 10 before my mother suddenly died and my father moved me to Brooklyn. The old wooden house was sealed. Covered in the dust of time. I broke the lock with rusty pliers. The smell of dampness and burnt ash hit my nose. Every stair creaked under my feet, the way up to the attic was dark. But I knew, something was up there. In the corner of the small prayer room on the second floor was a wooden chest, locked with a rusty iron lock. I smashed the chest with a hammer. The hinges broke, and the first thing I saw was a hollowed-out, rotting Bible. Inside were a bone amulet, shaped like a hand, with the Latin words, manus peccatoris, carved into it. A small piece of foil wrapped around something. And an old photo, my father in a robe, his right hand wrapped in a red bandage, standing in front of a little boy, me. I opened the foil with a trembling hand. Inside was a finger, or something that looked like a human finger, preserved in salt and wrapped in an amulet. I threw up in the trash can nearby. And then I saw the wall behind the altar. There was an uneven patch of cement plaster. I broke it. Behind the plaster was a small cavity, just big enough to hold a leather journal. The first line inside was handwritten, Malachi. Not a demon. A memory. A deal. The first page was my father's journal, a pastor, once revered in the parish. But in the journal, he wrote about dreams, where the word of God no longer works, and a third hand, a symbol of forbidden knowledge. They told me, to save the boy, I had to sacrifice a part of my own body, as a vessel. I did it. I prayed all night. And I cut my own hand to write the deal. I turned the page. A passage made my heart stop. Malachi is not the demon. He is the name I gave the boy when his mother was alive. That name means, messenger. He drowned when he was 3, but I begged for a chance. A part of him was kept. In me. And now in the new boy, in Mark. I knelt on the floor, my hands shaking. I am the second one. I am not the first Mark Leland. I am the vessel, created from a sacrifice. From the love of a father who couldn't accept losing his son. On the way back, my mind was blank. But my right hand started twitching. I pulled over. I took a pen from my pocket. My hand wrote on my left wrist, I was the first. I remember the drowning. I remember the prayer. He remembers. He is the first child. I went back to my apartment. In a daze. I opened my unfinished manuscript. A new chapter had been added, with no title, no chapter number. The first line, I don't want to destroy. I just want to exist. Your father promised. And a promise is a deal. I looked at my right hand. It lay still, like an animal playing dead. But I knew, it was listening, waiting. That night, I tried to meditate. Not to exorcise. But to meet him. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I didn't see light, no angels, just a long hallway made of bone, and at the end was a dark wooden door. As I got closer, a thin, bony hand slowly reached out through the crack. A voice, no, a memory shaped into sound, echoed, we were once one. And then I was forgotten. Now I'm rewriting myself. And you will be the paper. I woke up, drenched in sweat. But not from the dream. But from a gentle tapping, coming from inside my closet. 3 taps. A pause. Repeat. Like a child practicing tapping a rhythm to learn a new language. I started waking up in places I'd never been. One time it was on a bench in Washington Square Park at dawn. My jacket draped over the seat, my shoes covered in mud, but my phone showed a message saying, manuscript sent at 3:42 a.m. Another time it was in the basement bathroom of the Brooklyn Library. A place I don't remember ever visiting. In the toilet paper cabinet was a note scrawled in red ink, I am learning. Thank you. The words were written with my right hand. In a perfectly slanted font as if practiced for years. I started setting an alarm every 30 minutes at night, interrupting my sleep to stay awake. But Malachi didn't need sleep. He used the moments I was drifting off to slip in, like water seeping through a crack. One night, I recorded in my room. The white noise lasted for over 5 hours, except for a short segment at 3:28 a.m. The gentle sound of typing. A whisper, in my own voice. The first letter is blood. The second is flesh. The third letter is you. I printed out the manuscript to check. There were paragraphs that clearly didn't match my writing style. They were darker, more ancient, as if translated from a dead language. A passage described the agony of a soul trapped in a drowned child's body. He described the smell of lake water mixed with burnt hair. He told of the moment he was torn from his mother and put into a new host. I sat and read, and I felt my heart, as if I was reading my own diary from a past life. I went to see an old pastor, Father Victor Hayes in Queens, who had participated in a famous exorcism in the 80s. He gently touched my forehead, closed his eyes, and whispered a prayer. The moment his hand touched my shoulder, my right hand jerked violently, broke free from my jacket, and delivered a devastating punch to his chest. Father Hayes staggered back, coughing up blood, and yelled, "That thing. It's not a parasite. It's a memory." The church's security camera failed at that exact moment. No recording. No witnesses. I was arrested for assault. But not long after, I was released. The reason? Father Hayes dropped the charges, then retreated to a private nursing home. I knew why. Because he saw in my eyes, or in my hand, something he didn't dare name. I tried to meet an underground shaman named Liz, who specializes in soul extraction and spirit cleansing with ancient rituals. She touched my forehead and immediately fell backward, convulsing as if electrocuted. When she came to, she vomited blood, then looked at me trembling. "No. Not something to be cast out. This is the original. It has the right to be in you." Malachi didn't torture me. He didn't kill people. He didn't destroy things. He just wrote. He created new chapters every night. He edited old passages. And, the most terrifying thing, they were brilliant. I tried sending a passage to my editor with a secondary account, signed as ML. The next morning, I received an email back. "This is the best thing we've ever read from you. The prose is sharp, the imagery is vivid, and it has a holy meets demonic quality. Are you changing your style? Please send more." I looked at the manuscript. It was no longer a novel. It was a journal. The journal of an entity that was recording its journey from being forgotten to learning how to exist again. I started to hear his thoughts in my head. Not as a voice, but as an echo from a deeper layer of my brain, where there are no words, only concepts. He wanted eyes. He wanted legs. He wanted to leave the keyboard. He wanted to feel the sunlight directly. And the terrifying thing was, I no longer wanted to fight back. Every time he wrote, it felt like an electric current running through my body, an exhilarating, euphoric sensation, a high that no substance could provide. I started to feel the boundary blur. I typed with both hands. But sometimes, my two hands typed two different things. Once, my left hand was writing the next chapter about the detective character. My right hand opened another word tab and typed, "You agreed. You felt it. Now, give me the legs." I cried out in front of the screen. Not from fear, but because I knew it was going to happen. And a part of me was ready. I no longer knew when I was truly awake, or when I was being controlled. The line between will and reflex slowly vanished. I became a communication channel, and the real writer was a soul living on memories and concepts. I had to stop him before he could write the ending. I found a man named Brother Anthony, a priest from a secluded order who had been suspended by the church for his involvement in unorthodox exorcism rituals. He lived in a remote, abandoned monastery in the Catskills, over a 3-hour drive from the city. When I found him, he didn't ask many questions. He looked at my right hand, then bowed his head slightly as if he had known about the presence beforehand. "I don't cast out spirits. I just return the deal to its rightful place," he said. "Are you ready?" I nodded. I didn't speak. The ceremony was held in an old crypt, under the flickering light of candles and the scent of frankincense. On the wall, the Latin phrase was written in ash, "Thou shalt not remove what was willingly given." I lay on a stone table, my right hand tied tightly with consecrated rope. Brother Anthony began to pray. But it wasn't the prayer you hear in church. It was ancient, hoarse chants, as if they came from a throat with no windpipe. The air in the crypt grew cold. The candlelight flickered. And then, my right hand started thrashing. Not just twitching, but tearing. Every muscle fiber strained as if it was about to rip. I felt my shoulder bone being twisted from the inside. Then, he spoke. Not through my mouth. Not through a speaker. With my own blood. My right hand wrote on the stone wall, "Thou shalt not remove what was willingly given." Brother Anthony stepped back, his face pale. "Impossible," he mumbled. "You are not a demon. You are a will that was passed down. An entity that was bound by love, and cannot be cast out." I jumped up from the stone table, the rope falling away as if it had been cut. My right hand reached out to Anthony, as if to shake his hand, or strangle him. He recoiled, then suddenly collapsed, blood flowing from his nose and ears. My heart pounded. I quickly helped him up, apologizing profusely. But he didn't respond. The priest fell into a deep coma. There were no physical injuries, but his brain was completely disconnected. That was the doctor's diagnosis when I took him to the local hospital. The police came to take a statement. They checked the security camera. But once again, all the data from that night was corrupted. The hard drive recorded it, but when opened, it only showed a single frame on a loop, me sitting and writing. A hand-shaped glowing mark on my forehead. And behind me, reflected in the mirror, was a faceless shadow. I was released. No evidence. No trace. But I knew. Malachi had intervened with technology. He didn't just write with my hand. He rewrote reality. Back home, I no longer dared to touch my laptop. But he turned on the computer himself, opened Word, and wrote the first line of the new chapter. "You think you can erase me with a ceremony? I'm not a ghost. I'm a deal written in love and blood." I threw myself onto the bed, punching the wall with my left hand until it bled. I screamed. "I didn't choose you. I'm not a vessel." Immediately after, on the bathroom mirror, words appeared in the mist. "You didn't choose me. Your father chose me. And now, you must finish." I sat alone until morning. No more tears. No more anger. Only a haunting question in my head: if I am the product of a deal, then who is the original? Me, or him? I began to understand. Malachi was not like other entities that were cast out. He didn't scream, he didn't demand sacrifices, he didn't assassinate priests or draw blood circles on the floor. He was patient, intelligent, and had a very clear purpose. Not to destroy me. Not to rule the world. But to exist. Each day passed, he wrote more. Words appeared even when I was awake. My right hand was no longer just an arm. It was a living pen. A machine that recorded memories, not my own. I tried one last time. I cut off the internet. Cut the power. Hid my laptop. I wrote by hand with a pencil. With my left hand, trying to record what I remembered, what was mine. But my right hand seemed offended. It trembled. Then it suddenly snatched the notebook, flipped to another page, and scrawled. Not your truth. I started reading all the manuscripts he had written. It was no longer a novel. It was no longer a journal. It was a memoir of a past life. He told of drowning when he was the first child. About the scream in his lungs as water filled them. About the frantic prayer of a desperate father, my father, as his hand touched the cold body of his son. My father begged, he made a deal with blood and bone. To keep a piece of a soul, even if it was just through a hand. And then, Malachi didn't just write about the past. He started writing about me. About the time I was abandoned by my friends when I was 14. About the evening I almost committed suicide but was stopped by a stomach ache. About memories that I had never told anyone. He knew. He remembered. He was recording me, little by little, as if I were the next version of himself. I cried when I read one passage. I don't want to erase you. I want to rewrite you, in the way your father once did with me. I went back to my father's journal. There was a detail I had overlooked. Malachi cannot speak. But he can write. And he writes like a prophet. Every time he writes, he doesn't just tell, he creates. His hand rewrote my language. And from then on, I could hear him in my mind. I realized, Malachi wasn't mute. He didn't need to speak. Because writing was his true language. No pronunciation needed. No vocal cords. Just a concept transmitted through movement, and the world understands. One night, I woke up with both hands typing on the keyboard. Not alternating, but in parallel. Each hand writing a different passage. My left hand wrote the next chapter about the detective character. My right hand opened another word tab and typed, "The hand is the beginning. Now I need the legs." I jumped out of my chair, falling to the floor. My legs started to tremble. Not from fear, but as if they were waiting for a command. At that moment, the phone rang. An email from the Word online system. Subject, Final Manuscript, Malachi. Attached was a file, Malachi_final_manuscript. Doc. I opened it. The document was over 500 pages long. The last chapter was titled, "The One with Two Names." In that chapter, he wrote about a soul that had been divided. One part remained. And one part was rewritten through another person. And when the vessel was complete, when the hands, eyes, legs, and memories all belonged to him, he would become an independent entity. No longer needing a host. No longer needing Mark. I looked at the last line, Malachi is not my name. Malachi is the name your parents gave you. Now, I'm taking it back. I stood up. My right hand on my chest. My heartbeat skipped a beat. In the mirror, my eyes were no longer mine. I knew there was one last piece of the puzzle. I had understood who Malachi was. I understood when he had been inside me. But I still didn't know, why was I chosen? And why did my father do that? I went back to the old house in Rhinebeck again. This time, I wasn't looking for books or amulets. I was looking for a will. In my father's old bedroom, behind a framed picture of a walnut tree, I found a small crack, where he hid one thing. A handwritten letter, titled, "For my son, the last time." I opened it with a trembling hand. The handwriting was firm but shaky. "My dearest Mark, if you are reading this, it means you have started to feel it. And Malachi has woken up. I never intended for you to go through this. But when you were 3, you got a disease that doctors said was incurable. I prayed. I cried, I begged. And then, the answer came in a dream. A voice in the darkness told me, sacrifice the damaged part. I will bring the soul back through the hand. I performed the ceremony. I cut off my own right hand. And they kept their promise. You got better. But I realized, what came back wasn't just you. Malachi, the name your mother gave the first child, lived in that hand. I lived with it for 10 years. But I couldn't bear it. He's not evil. He's not malicious. He just wants to keep writing. I didn't dare to exorcise him. I was afraid of losing you again. So, I chose to end myself, so the loop wouldn't continue. But the prayer wasn't broken. The vessel would find its way back. You are him. And he is you. Please forgive me. You decide whether you will be the end, or the rewrite. I love you. No matter who you are. I didn't cry. No more tears. Just emptiness, and a question that kept echoing in my head. If my father wasn't the victim, but the one who started it? I went back home, the letter in my left hand. My right hand was unusually silent. I put the letter on the desk. Immediately, my right hand snatched a pen and wrote a single line on the edge of the paper. I remember him. And I forgive him. Malachi remembered. He didn't hate. He didn't want revenge. He just wanted to exist and be written. I looked at my laptop screen. The file Malachi_final_manuscript.doc had just been updated. The newest chapter was titled, The Legacy. In it, Malachi wrote, I was once a drowned child. I was once a living hand. I was once a forgotten voice. But now, I am words. And words don't die. People remember a poem. They remember a prayer. They remember the last sentence. They don't need to know who I am. They just need to read me. I understood he was no longer a ghost, no longer a physical Malachi. He was a memory. A story. An immortal manuscript. And I, Mark Leland, was just the next chapter in that endless journey. That night, I lay still in the darkness. Both hands relaxed. I whispered into the empty space in front of me, write. But this time, let me choose the first sentence. My right hand gripped the pen. My left hand gently tapped the keyboard. We wrote together. Not to fight each other, but to complete the final deal. My 30th birthday started with a strange thing. Nothing happened at all. No tapping at 3:33 a.m. No keyboard typing on its own. No strange words on the mirror. The whole day passed in an unusual silence, as if everything, even Malachi, had gone to sleep. I sat alone in front of my laptop, all the lights off. In my hands was a printed copy of Malachi_final_manuscript.doc. On the last page, the sentence was cut off midway. Tonight, when you are of age, and the memory is full, we will become. Become what? 3:33 a.m. The phone rang. No number. No name. It just said, unknown. I answered. No human voice. Just the sound of typing, rhythmic like a heartbeat. Tap. 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 Then 2 taps at the same time, as if 2 hands were writing at once. I threw the phone on the floor. The screen lit up, showing an automatic message, "It's time." I collapsed onto my desk. A sharp pain shot from my lower back to my neck. My body felt like it was being ripped into 2 halves, one half listening, one half screaming. I opened my eyes. Both of my hands were typing, but they were no longer mine. The screen was split in 2, the left hand wrote a passage in Mark's style, criminal, realistic, cold. The right hand wrote in an ancient font, with a suggestive, biblical tone, "The memory has been recorded. The entity has been merged. The hand is the beginning. Now I need the legs." I jumped up in a panic. But my legs didn't move. Not numb. Not paralyzed. But waiting for a command. A voice echoed from inside my head, "We will go. Writing is no longer enough. We must be present. We must walk." I fell to the floor, trembling as if I had a high fever. In my panic, I saw a memory film playing in my mind, a child in a white shirt, walking barefoot on a church floor. My father, kneeling, placing his hand on the child's head. A salt circle shattered, and the child began to dissolve into light. I clearly heard my father whispering, "Your name is Malachi. This name means messenger. But it can also mean bringer of doom." I woke up with a start. My mouth was whispering in someone else's voice, "Malachi isn't him. Malachi is me. I am the copy. I am the experiment. I am the complete vessel." I ran into the bathroom. In the light, I looked in the mirror. My 2 eyes were different colors. One brown, one a deep black. Both of them looked at me like a stranger. I yelled, "Who are you? What do you want from me?" My right hand snatched a pen from the sink and scratched on the mirror, "I am what you have become. I want to walk." At that moment, my 2 legs started walking without my control. I left the apartment. I went down the stairs. I walked in the cold Brooklyn night, barefoot. Every step was a piercing pain, because my skin was not used to being controlled like this. I stopped in front of an old building, a long-abandoned printing house. I didn't know why. But Malachi knew. The door opened. The lights turned on. Even though no one was there. On the floor was an old wooden table. On the table, a pristine parchment scroll. A quill pen, already dipped in ink. I sat down. and both of my hands started writing. The voice in my head spoke for the last time, not threatening, not forceful, just a simple truth: you think you are the writer. But in fact, you are just the paper. The memory needs to be transcribed. Not to exist, but not to be forgotten. I wrote until blood dripped onto the paper. I don't know for how long. I only know that I finished writing myself. I woke up in the old room, the abandoned printing house. Sunlight streamed through the broken windows, shining on the parchment that was now soaked with dry blood. On the table was a complete manuscript. Not a novel, not a journal, but something else. A complete copy of me, Mark Leland, rewritten by the hand of Malachi. I touched my face. My left hand was cold. My right hand had a pulse. A separate heartbeat, not in sync with my own. My body was now a battlefield. And the final battle was coming. I locked the apartment door. Unplugged the phone. Smashed my laptop. No more connection. No more place for him to write. Only me. And him. In this mind. I sat down in the middle of the living room. Turned off all the lights. Closed my eyes. I didn't pray. I just listened. Malachi's voice echoed, not loud, not threatening, but like a part of me was reading my own words from a long time ago. You want to erase me? You will have to erase yourself. I am your first pain. I am your first memory. If I disappear, so will your father. Your mother. Everything you have ever lived, was me rewriting for you. I screamed. No. I am me. You are not me. My right hand jerked violently. It punched my left temple. I fell backward. Dazed. In my daze, I saw a blank white space. In the middle were two people. One was me, thin, trembling, covered in ink. The other looked exactly like me, but his eyes were ink black. Malachi. You are a memory, I said. Not reality. He replied, light as a breath. I am a memory that has learned to write the future. I lunged, punching him. But my fist went through him like smoke. He laughed. You are just my character, Mark. A more complete version. You're fighting me, like paper fighting ink. I screamed, tearing the manuscript in my hand. The white pages ripped. Ink splattered. A shockwave spread through the space. Malachi stepped back. His eyes flashed. He was angry, but he didn't scream. He only said one sentence, you just tore your own memory. And I saw everything blur. I forgot my father. I forgot my name. I forgot every word I had ever written. No more Mark. No more Malachi. Only whiteness. Then, a screen turned on. I opened my eyes. I was sitting in front of my laptop. The screen showed a new file. Untitled_final.doc, I opened it. There was nothing. Just a blinking cursor. As if it was waiting for someone to write. I touched the keyboard. My left hand was stiff. My right hand moved. Slowly. Each character appeared, I am still here. But this time, I'm waiting for a command. I understood. I had erased Malachi, and at the same time, erased myself. But he left a blank space. A land with no memories. A new beginning. I looked at my right hand. I placed it on the desk. I whispered, "If you really want to exist, then let me write. But in my own way." The cursor blinked. My right hand was on the keys. And the first chapter was written. Not by Mark. Not by Malachi. But by a new person. I'm no longer sure who I am. My name used to be Mark Leland. And now? Maybe it still is. Maybe not. I don't hear Malachi's voice anymore. No more commands in my head, no more right hand automatically typing at 3:33 a.m. No more tapping from inside my mind. But I know, he hasn't disappeared. He has just completed his task. The manuscript was sent from my secondary account. The publisher didn't ask many questions. They just sent a short, simple, excited email, "We have never read anything like this." It's not a novel. It's a ritual. A plea. A living entity made of words. And the ending made us ask ourselves, are we writing our own lives? Or is someone else writing them for us? The book cover was solid black. No picture. Just the title, embossed, Malachi, the Memory Replicator. Author, Malachi Leland. I didn't object. I didn't sue for copyright. I didn't deny it. Because deep down, I wrote it. But it wasn't entirely me. Since then, I no longer dream of the shadow in the mirror. I no longer write reversed words on my skin. It no longer hurts when I put my hands on the keyboard. But once, while washing my hands, I saw in the mirror, just for a moment, my right hand, writing something with its index finger, on the foggy surface. I couldn't see it clearly. But when I wiped it clean, there was nothing. And I realized, maybe, Malachi is no longer inside me. Maybe, he has found his own way. Through the story. Through the book. Through the reader. I walked around the bookstore near my house a few weeks after publication. A teenager was reading Malachi on a chair, his eyes glazed, his right hand gripping the book. Next to him, a man leaned against a bookshelf, muttering something, word for word, in reverse. A girl walked by, glanced at the last page, then turned to look straight at me, as if she recognized something. I quietly walked away. I didn't say anything. Because I know, when a story is written, it no longer belongs to the writer. It lives in the reader. It moves from hand to hand. It multiplies without blood, without flesh, it only needs to be repeated. That night, I placed the first copy of Malachi on my desk. I opened it to the last page. There were no words. Just a blank space. And then, as if someone, or myself, picked up a pen and wrote, "Are you sure you are controlling your whole body? Or has someone been rewriting you, line by line? Night by night?" I smiled. I nodded slightly. Then I closed the book. My friend, if you have listened this far, I just want to ask one thing. Take a look at your hand. That's right, your hand. The hand that has scrolled through every line of this story. The hand that still thinks it's doing what you want. Now, look closely. Is there a line of words being carved into your skin that you can't see? Because it's very possible. He has already started writing. What if your body was no longer yours, but worse, your voice? What if possession wasn't just about your limbs or your heart, but the very words you speak, the breath you take? In the next chapter, Whisper Horror takes you to a world where stories don't end when they're told, they keep living, through the one who tells them. The last whisper, the whisper doesn't stop when you fall silent. It only waits, to be told again, through your voice. I hear demons talking in my head. It's not a dream. It's not a hallucination. It's a real voice, dry, rigid, like rotting wood breaking in a deserted church. It says, "Believe it, I am in you now." That was the first thing Clara Jensen wrote in her medical journal, 6 months before she died. Many people said she was crazy. Some suggested it was just a symptom of schizophrenia. But if you ever read deep enough, or listened closely to her final screams, you would see, this wasn't just a psychiatric case. It was something older, darker, and much more precise. Kentucky. Spring of 1973. A small town on the Tennessee border, where the prairies stretch on endlessly and the church is still the center of all community life. Here, death is inevitable. But what people fear more than anything is the devil. Clara Jensen, 22, was a senior sociology student at Western Kentucky University. She was the type of person who could light up a room with just a smile. Sharp, clever, and never missed a class. But then, everything changed. It all started with a seizure. Clara was giving a presentation on Southern folklore. Suddenly, she collapsed, her eyes rolling back, her limbs convulsing as if her body was being bent by an invisible force. She was taken to the nearest hospital. Doctors diagnosed her with a rare form of psychogenic epilepsy. At the same time, a psychological evaluation showed signs of mild depression. Clara didn't believe it. She insisted she was completely lucid. That she heard voices in her head. One voice. A single entity. A name that wouldn't leave. "I don't think it wanted to hurt me, at first," Clara wrote in a letter to her psychology professor. "But then it started, giving me prophecies. At first, they were small things. Tomorrow, your sister will fall. Your father will break his coffee mug tonight. Your neighbor is having an affair." Those things happened exactly as foretold. When Clara told people, no one believed her. Until her sister slipped in the kitchen and hit her head on the refrigerator. Until her father broke the precious antique porcelain cup at dinner. And until the neighbor was caught hiding behind another man's car. "I am not crazy," Clara said during her last consultation at the medical center. "I am being watched. And that thing is using me as a conduit." She started to avoid anything sacred. The cross, it made her tremble. Holy water, it made her vomit. The Bible, it blistered her wrist when she touched it. The doctors changed their diagnosis, dissociative disorder. Or somatic symptom disorder. But no sedative worked. Day by day, Clara became more withdrawn. She didn't sleep in rooms with mirrors. She didn't stand near any holy paintings. And especially, she hated the sound of church bells. In an audio recording, she said, "The voice in my head says, bells make it weak. But it also tells me I'm not supposed to hide." It didn't come to destroy. It came to teach me to rewrite myself. Clara's family, being conservative Catholics, began to suspect this was no longer a medical issue. One night, her mother recounted, "I walked into her room and saw her, Clara, standing with her face to the wall, speaking in the voice of someone at least 60 years older than her. She said, 'I have been here longer than any of your saints. And now, I need to write a new scripture.'" Her father, after being refused help by the hospital, decided to contact the church. And then, Father Daniel appeared. A young priest, 40 years old, with degrees in both theology and medicine. At first, he refused to believe Clara was possessed. "There's no evidence," he said. "She needs therapy, not an exorcism." But what changed his mind was that night. Father Daniel witnessed Clara walking backward on the wall, her head tilted back, her mouth speaking ancient Latin, even though she had never studied the language. The floor screeched with each step, like fingernails scraping on stone. And then, she fell straight down, as if thrown by an invisible hand. No broken bones. No injuries. Just her eyes, empty. Father Daniel sat in his car, his hands shaking as he wrote in his pastoral journal, "We were wrong. Not a disease. Not a disorder. An intelligent entity is borrowing her voice to speak to me. I don't know what it is. But it knows I am listening." Clara Jensen's medical records were transferred to a specialized medical facility in Louisville. They noted, female patient, 22 years old. Recurrent seizures of unknown etiology. Poor response to anti-epileptic drugs. Exhibiting signs of dissociation, strong reaction to religious symbols. They called it a complex multi-symptom case. But in the family's eyes, it was just a polite way of saying, "We have no damn clue what's going on." Clara began to react violently to anyone carrying sacred objects. A nurse wearing a crucifix necklace walked into the room, and she screamed. A priest reading a prayer outside the hallway, and she vomited uncontrollably. Once, a doctor left a small vial of holy water in his coat pocket, and Clara fainted without even seeing it. Father Daniel was called in again, at the urgent request of the family. This time, he sat next to Clara, discreetly placing a Bible under his chair. Clara's eyes were closed. But her voice suddenly rang out, hoarse, "Put it away. I can smell the blood of the one who wrote it." Father Daniel swallowed hard. He had never met a patient like this. But he still didn't believe in demons. He wanted proof. And then, proof came on the third night. Clara was sleeping. Surveillance cameras recorded her sitting up at 2:17 a.m. Not waking up, but sitting up with an impossible bend in her spine. She slowly turned her head to look at the camera, her eyes wide, black as a deep pit. Her mouth moved. And when they analyzed the audio recording, it was ancient Latin, a language recorded in 15th century religious documents. The content was incomplete, but understandable. Corpus non resistet, verbum novum nascitur. The body will not resist, a new word will be born. In the morning, Clara remembered nothing. But on her arm, scratched with a fingernail or sharp object, was a series of numbers, 67. From that day on, Clara no longer called the voices in her head it. She called them they. They don't want to be cast out. They just want to be remembered. Doctors debated endlessly. Some thought it was an extreme case of multiple personality disorder. Others feared there was a social factor, that Clara was imitating famous exorcism cases. But no one could explain the strange details. The prophecies continued. Signs of blood appeared on the sheets every morning. And there were times when Clara talked to herself, but in two different voices. Father Daniel began to meticulously record every phenomenon. He reread exorcism documents from the Vatican, texts that the Church had forbidden from being shared. He realized, Clara wasn't just possessed. She was becoming a focal point, a stage, for something older than belief. The first twist happened on the morning of the 14th day. Clara's sister, Emily, walked into the room, carrying a family photo. Clara was sitting with her back to her. The moment the photo touched the light in the room, Clara whipped around, her face emotionless, and said in Emily's own voice, "You'll fall on the stairs if you try to take another step. I already saw it in the mirror." Emily screamed, dropping the photo. And just as she said, she slipped while stepping back, breaking her ankle. Clara, at that moment, fainted. No one knew if she was conscious of what had just happened. At this point, Father Daniel had no more doubts. He contacted the diocese, requesting permission to perform an exorcism. The Church initially refused. The reason: insufficient scientific grounds to rule out psychological causes. Father Daniel was furious. When will we realize, evil doesn't wait for scientific consensus? He prepared himself. A small room in a suburban church. A wooden table, restraint chair, holy water, silver cross, and ancient Latin scriptures. Everything was done according to ritual, without official announcement, to avoid the media. The Jensen family agreed. There was no other choice. Clara was brought in during the night. She was silent the entire way. But as she stepped through the chapel door, she started singing. Not a normal melody. It was a hymn, completely in reverse. Each note slid backward through her tongue, emitting a metallic echo as if bouncing from inside a tomb. Father Daniel was stunned. He whispered, "If this is a sickness, then medicine has been wrong for 2,000 years." And he opened the Bible, preparing for the first exorcism. The first exorcism began at 4 a.m. The time that Kentuckians call the devil's hour, when the light has not yet appeared, and the last dream still clings to humanity's eyelids. Father Daniel stood opposite Clara. She was tied to the wooden chair, her limbs twitching non-stop. No one knew why she was so strong. Doctors said Clara's muscles had atrophied after a long time in the hospital. But when tied up, she broke the chair leg with her knee. Father Daniel placed the cross on Clara's forehead. His lips trembled as he read the prayer, in nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Clara lifted her head, her lips curling into a crooked smile. A voice burst from her throat, the voice of a 6-year-old child. "It's not a game, Father. Not anymore." The family stood behind the glass, scared but not daring to look away. Emily held her mother's hand, whispering, "She's not a person anymore. Something is living in her." After a few minutes of prayer, Father Daniel moved closer, bringing the cross near Clara's chest. Instantly, her skin seared. A burn in the shape of a cross was branded on her skin, like red-hot iron. Clara screamed, not in pain, but in anger. Her voice deepened as if echoing from a deep well, "You think that thing can burn me? We wrote on your bones even before the Holy Bible was born." Father Daniel backed away. His hands shook uncontrollably. Every priest has had doubts, but few have seen an entity that knows their name, knows the sins they committed as a boy altar server. Clara started whispering in multiple voices at once. An old voice, a young voice, a woman's voice, a man's voice. They all blended together like a horrifying chorus singing with the vocal cords of a 22-year-old girl. We were once your wife. We were the people you buried. We were the children you didn't save. Father Daniel knelt down. Not out of faith, but because his knees could no longer bear the weight of his terror. He hissed. In the name of God, I command you to speak your name. Clara lifted her head. Her voice was as light as the wind, but as loud as a collapsing church bell. My name is the last name you dare not read. The exorcism ended after 2 hours. Clara was unconscious. The room was so cold that breath froze into mist. Father Daniel burned all his notes. He only kept one thing, muttering it as he walked out of the church: it's not just one. There are more than that. The report sent to the archdiocese was returned, with a note. Insufficient scientific evidence. Recommend transferring to medical supervision. Science cannot accept what it cannot measure. But faith does not need measurement. And in Clara Jensen's case, faith had exceeded the tolerance of both reason and flesh. The second exorcism began 3 days later. Clara woke up before the ceremony, her eyes calm. She looked directly into Father Daniel's eyes, and spoke in her own voice, I am ready. But the one inside me isn't. Father Daniel nodded. He placed his hand on her head. Instantly, another voice snapped out, irritable and contemptuous, don't pretend to be pious, Daniel. You're the one who stole holy bread because you were hungry. You're the one who baptized the dying without believing they were saved. The twist began to reveal itself. Clara was not possessed by one soul. She was a convergence point for many. Each entity that entered her left a piece behind. A memory. A word. A scream. By the sixth exorcism, Clara no longer screamed. She laughed. Every time he read the prayer, she would tilt her head. A smirk on her face, same old words. We've heard them for hundreds of years. Don't you have anything new, Daniel? Father Daniel was almost going mad. This was no longer a battle for salvation. This was a contest to see who would break first, the girl's soul, or his faith. The last session of the first week, Clara said only one sentence, throughout the entire session: this is not a battle. Father. This is a game. And you keep feeding it energy. Father Daniel looked straight into her eyes, and for the first time, he put his hand on his chest and admitted, we have gone too far to turn back. If this is a game, then God must be the one who sets the rules. And I will be the last pawn. No one in Clara's family remembers exactly when the exorcisms began. Just like a dying person doesn't remember the last moment they truly took a deep breath. All they know is, by the 10th session, Clara Jensen was no longer Clara Jensen. Father Daniel kept a small black notebook, with a soft leather cover, and no page numbers. On the first page was the sentence he wrote after the first session. The process will not end with an expulsion, but with a deal. Session 13, Clara scratched words with her fingernail onto her thigh, let me speak. Session 19, while restrained. She sprung up like a coiled spring, head butting the wall, her mouth screaming, behind it are hundreds. Who do you think you are talking to? Session 24, 4 people holding Clara down all fell ill for no clear reason. 2 went temporarily blind. 1 lost his memory for 6 hours. The last one lost his ability to speak. Father Daniel didn't stop. He numbered each session in red ink. Each session, Clara showed a new symptom. One day, she spoke ancient German. Another day, she tapped Morse code on the table, spelling out the message, "We are being retold." By the 30th session, the voice no longer came from Clara's mouth, but from the wall. A deep, distant male voice echoed from behind a cracked statue of the Virgin Mary in the exorcism room. "You believe in words. But words are just the first layer of ink." The twist became clearer. There wasn't just one entity in Clara. There were entities fighting for the right to speak. They didn't cooperate. They occupied, suffocated, and took turns appearing like a flock of crows fighting over a carcass. One night, Father Daniel sat rereading his handwritten exorcism script for the 43rd time. He stopped at a part he didn't remember writing. The last session will be the 67th. That is the number of the one who remembers more than the one who writes. He didn't know who wrote that line. The handwriting was his. But the ink was dry and old, as if it had been there for weeks. In the 44th session, Clara no longer reacted to the cross. Father Daniel touched her forehead with a silver cross, and her skin didn't burn, didn't retract, she just gave a tired smile. "I have moved beyond symbols," she said. "Only words still hold power." Session 50, Clara began to talk about the souls within her. There was a baby buried alive for being a witch. There was a German soldier who died in a bunker from an Allied bomb, carrying the rage of the 6 people he killed. There was a young mother who burned herself in a church for being accused of adultery. And dozens more names. But I don't know who the real owner is. She didn't remember who she was. But she still spoke to the person opposite her with intelligence, sarcasm, and sometimes, she knew their unspoken thoughts. A nurse joked that Clara was a demonic radio. The next day, she permanently lost her voice. No vocal cord damage. No logical diagnosis. The strongest twist happened in session 58. Clara suddenly sprung up, yelling into the empty space, "They are not demons. They are forgotten memories." In session 63, Father Daniel collapsed the moment he read the first line of the exorcism prayer. He was taken to the hospital with a temporary speech disorder. And for the next 3 days, no one could read a single prayer for Clara. But she still talked. Session 67 came, silently. No one was counting anymore. But Clara, or something in her, still remembered. She looked into the camera lens, the camera set up to record the final session, and whispered, "This is the last manuscript. After it, there will be someone new to continue writing." Her voice changed constantly. From a man to a woman. From a child to an old man. From whimpering to screaming. Each voice was like a recurring death. Each breath seemed to carry the ashes of the past. And then, she fell silent. Only one voice, clear, decisive, and calm, rose from her own throat: "No one is possessed. They are just carriers of untold stories." Father Daniel turned away. For the first time in his life, he cried. Not out of failure. Not out of fear. But because he understood. After the 67th exorcism, Clara Jensen fell silent. No screaming. No scratching her skin. No staring into space as before. She lay on the bed, her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Her breath was so shallow it couldn't be measured with a stethoscope. Her heartbeat was only 42 beats per minute. And then, she died. The death certificate listed, cause of death: severe malnutrition, severe dehydration, nervous and physical exhaustion. The hospital stated that Clara had not been able to absorb food for days. Her digestive system rejected all nutrients, even intravenously. The medical conclusion was, a syndrome of self-neglect. An abstract term, implying only one thing: her body chose to die. Clara's family was shattered. Her mother was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Her father suffered from depression, not leaving his room for a year. Emily, her sister, dropped out of college, moving to another state to live anonymously. And Father Daniel was summoned to court. Along with him, 2 people were accused: Mrs. Jensen, Clara's mother, with the charge of complicity; Mr. Jensen, with the charge of failure to report violent behavior. The biggest charge: homicide by unlicensed ritual. The media went wild. Headlines screamed, "Exorcism or murder? The cross and the needle, who has the power of life and death? Science or the devil, who killed Clara Jensen?" The trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed. Half were parishioners, praying before the session began. Half were medical students, shaking their heads as they listened to Father Daniel's testimony. The physical evidence was clear: Clara's body was emaciated. No signs of poisoning or violent intervention. But there were chemical burns in the shape of a cross, appearing multiple times. Along with that, audio recordings showed Clara was not a conscious subject during many exorcism sessions. A video was released on the 6th day of the trial, and that was the turning point. The tape was recorded from a camera placed on the ceiling of the exorcism room. The footage was blurry, slightly shaky, because the camera was old. Clara sat up straight, eyes closed, muttering. Father Daniel read the prayer. Emily stood behind the glass door. Everything was normal, until the 47th second. A faint shadow moved behind Clara. Not a person. Not light. It was a slender figure. Its head tilted, its feet not touching the ground. The entire courtroom went silent as the video played that moment. A forensic psychologist defending Father Daniel said, "I won't claim it's a ghost. But I will state, something beyond analysis was happening." The court recessed for 2 days. The judges requested to see all 67 video recordings. But strangely, only 43 tapes existed. The remaining tapes were either corrupted, lost audio, or completely erased. No one took responsibility. No one had that high level of access. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Father Daniel was not found guilty. Clara's mother was acquitted. Clara's father received a reprimand. The reason: insufficient evidence to prove criminal elements. But the most terrifying thing wasn't in the verdict. It was in the aftermath. After the trial, the Catholic Church in Germany and many European countries temporarily suspended all exorcism rituals without medical supervision. Many considered it a victory for reason. Others believed it was proof that the entity had won. Emily, Clara's sister, did not appear in court. But in a letter to the judge, she wrote, "My sister didn't die from starvation. She died because she was holding on to too many voices. And when she no longer had the strength, she let them go." Father Daniel withdrew from the church. He lived a reclusive life in a small monastery in Pennsylvania. But years later, a journalist discovered the final entry in his notebook. It contained only one line. "If I was wrong, then the devil never needed to hide." 10 years after Clara Jensen's death, people almost forgot the story. The media moved on to political scandals. The church was silent as if it had never happened. Only one person couldn't forget, Emily Jensen. She lived in Vermont, in a wooden house deep in the woods, with no phone, no internet. Every day she copied what she remembered about Clara, not chronologically, but by sound. "Because I heard them before I remembered them," Emily wrote in her journal. "And sometimes, I'm not sure if it's my memory, or my sister's." The twist begins here. Memory and recollection start to blend. Emily started to dream about the exorcisms again. But in her dreams, the person tied up was her. And the one reading the prayers was no longer Father Daniel, but Clara. In an audio recording Emily sent to a parapsychologist named Howard Vickers, her voice was shaking, whispering, "I hear her, in the wind, in my sleep, in every breaking sound. But what scares me more is that I've started writing backward with my left hand unconsciously. And I'm right-handed." Howard, a scholar who studied ancient Mesopotamian rituals, sought out Emily in 1994. He didn't believe in demons, but he believed in the phenomenon of memory symbiosis through ritual. Some cultures believe that a curse is not magic, but a script written into the bloodline through repetition. Whoever repeats it enough times, will become its carrier. Emily let Howard read her entire journal. In it were passages very similar to Clara's medical journal, even though Emily had never read the original. Like this passage, "They don't need blood. They just need a voice. And if I stay silent, they will speak for themselves." Howard immediately cross-referenced them. The result, 89% match, line by line, paragraph by paragraph. Emily was stunned. "I never wrote this." A bigger twist appeared when Howard found a cassette tape from the old evidence room related to Clara's case. The tape was unlabeled, but sealed with the case code. When he played it, it was completely blank. No human voice. No sound. Just a low-frequency hum that lasted for 6 minutes and 13 seconds. Howard sent the tape to an audio expert at Boston University. Spectral analysis showed, in the recording, there was a series of broken waves, similar to a data encoding structure. But it wasn't Morse code. It was closer to the resonance pattern of brain waves during sleepwalking. When he amplified the tape's volume to the maximum and filtered out the noise, a faint, distant female voice appeared. "Someone is rewriting me." Howard went back to see Emily. But the house was empty. No signs of a struggle. No letter left behind. Just a notebook lying open. With a sentence rewritten hundreds of times, "They are not going anywhere." 3 years later, Emily was still missing. And then, a small publisher in Maine received an unsigned manuscript. Title: The Last Whisper. Author: my sister. The manuscript detailed Clara's exorcism sessions, but with the perspective of the possessed. The feeling of someone else speaking with your mouth. The horror of realizing the memories in your head are no longer your own. The last part of the manuscript wrote, "I no longer remember my name. But I remember the name of the one who screamed inside me for 67 nights. Its name is the untold word." The manuscript was never published. The editor, after finishing it, committed suicide by burning his hand on a gas stove. He left no suicide note. Only a single line written in lipstick on the mirror, "My voice is no longer mine." Howard went missing in 1999, after accepting an invitation to speak about Clara's case at Yale University. Security cameras recorded him entering the hotel room, alone. No one saw him leave. The room had no back door. Police only found a scrawled drawing on the wall, depicting a wide-open mouth with hundreds of words spilling from its throat. They don't call it writing. They call it somnambulistic translation. Between 2000 and 2007, a series of strange phenomena were recorded at writers' workshops, literary conferences, and writing therapy classes in the eastern coastal states. The participants, who didn't know each other, suddenly started writing the same type of text. Long, fragmented, with a repeating symbol. And the phrase, "Let me be told again." At first, researchers thought it was an inside joke. But after cross-referencing the manuscripts, they discovered, these people came from different regions. They didn't share media. And many wrote while sleeping, completely unaware of what they were doing. A man named Mark Devlin, a literature professor in Michigan, woke up in the middle of the night. His hand covered in ink. On his bedroom wall were 17 paragraphs, written in a mixed ancient language of Latin, Enochian, and Anglo-Saxon. Part of it could be translated, "I have never died. Only been interrupted." Mark had no history of mental illness. But after that incident, he lost the ability to read text. Every word appeared to him as moving. The letters danced, formed the shape of a human mouth, and then disappeared. In the next year, 14 other people fell into a similar state. Researchers named this phenomenon the syndrome of recursive narratives. Symptoms included involuntary writing in a half-asleep state, temporary amnesia, a feeling of being compelled by a voice without a throat, and especially the recurrence of the image of a glowing open mouth in drawings, writing, and dream descriptions. A neurological researcher named Rachel Linwood tracked 8 cases. She realized all of them had either heard about the Clara Jensen case or read an excerpt from the manuscript, The Last Whisper. Rachel, who didn't believe in the occult, argued, "This is a literary virus. It spreads not through physical contact, but through concepts. Once you hear, read, or imagine the story, you become the next host." To prove her hypothesis, she conducted a simple experiment. She printed 10 handwritten copies of the excerpt, "Let me be told again." She gave them to 10 creative writing students. She monitored their behavior for 3 weeks. The results: 4 people showed no symptoms. 3 people drew mouths involuntarily in their notebooks. 2 people woke up with pens in their hands and the words, "I am still here," written on their beds. 1 person disappeared while sleeping. The security camera only recorded a scratching sound, as if someone was writing on the wall with their fingernail. Rachel stopped the experiment, submitting a report to the state health department. No one took action. A week later, she jumped from a 10th floor window. She left no suicide note. Only an audio file sent to her roommate with the following content: "I was wrong. It's not a literary virus. It's a living script. Anyone who hears it becomes the narrator. And the narrator cannot stay silent forever. Rachel's suicide was not covered by the media. But the audio recording was leaked online. An anonymous group called Those Who Whispered began to appear on occult forums. They shared manuscripts, audio recordings, and hand-drawn images of the third mouth, a drawing like a human mouth in the middle of the chest, where the heart should be. The group's operator was named Mouth 67. In a final post before the forum was shut down, he wrote, "We don't write. We just continue." And he left an image, an empty notebook, open to the first page. On it, a single line. "The last whisper begins again." From then on, the term sleep writing was documented in medical literature as a clinical phenomenon that could not yet be classified. But for those who had heard, read, or witnessed a part of Clara Jensen's story, they understood, it wasn't sleep. It was when the story began to rewrite itself. In 2012, a family moved into an old wooden house in northern Vermont, near the Canadian border. The house had been abandoned for almost 20 years. The previous owner was a young woman named Emily Jensen, who had disappeared without a trace. The new family, the Chandlers and their 9-year-old son, were thrilled. The house had antique architecture, original wood floors, and a basement that was locked. The husband, Martin, decided to break the lock on moving day. The basement door was old, the hinges rusted. And on the lock, a single letter was carved. The basement was empty of furniture. There was only one small room, with no windows, no electricity, and no ventilation. All the walls were covered with handwriting. Not in lines, no punctuation. The passages connected in a spiral, from the ceiling to the floor, and repeated. At first, the Chandlers thought it was graffiti from a homeless person. But when the wife, Lucy, tried to read a passage, her nose started to bleed. Her eyes blurred, her heart rate skyrocketed. And she whispered, "I heard it breathing," from the wall. Martin hired a freelance occult expert to check the room. This person only stayed for 7 minutes before running out. He left his recording equipment, an ultrasonic microphone. When he played back the data, the beginning was just noise. But at the 5th minute, a whisper appeared, extremely faint but clear. "Write me out. Write me out of this death." The Chandler family called the police. The basement was sealed off. A team of linguistic archaeologists was invited from Brown University. Text analysis showed there were at least 17 different handwriting styles. Some languages had never been identified. A line in the middle of the ceiling read, "I am never silent. Only insufficiently written." The twist appeared when they cross-referenced the writing with the manuscript, The Last Whisper. Almost 70% of the content matched. A passage written at the bottom of the wall clearly stated, "If you read this, stop. Every eye that lingers on me is a new mouth opening." Ancient language professor, Miriam Gresham, decided to spend 24 hours in the room with her research team. They turned on the cameras, and brought food and electromagnetic frequency detectors. At the 17th hour, the connection was lost. The camera was jammed with static, only emitting a soft howling sound. At the 21st hour, the police broke down the door. The scene inside shocked the entire emergency response team. All the chairs were arranged in a spiral. Miriam was lying in the middle of the room, her eyes open, her lips moving without a sound. The other researchers were writing on the walls with their fingernails. Miriam didn't remember anything afterward. But when asked how she felt, she whispered a sentence. "I feel like I am being retold, by the voice of someone who has never been born." After this event, the room was sealed with steel and concrete. It was called the Written Room. A year later, the basement was burned down due to an electrical short. The Chandler family no longer lived in the house. But the terrifying thing was, when the police investigated the scene, there was no ash. No burn marks. Only a single white notebook in the middle of the room, the first page inscribed, "Rewrite me." The notebook was temporarily displayed at an occult exhibition in New York. But after only 3 days, it automatically gained 7 more handwritten pages, even though it was kept in a sealed glass box. No one wrote. No ink. But the words still appeared, like dried blood on paper. A researcher simulated the handwriting, cross-referencing it with Father Daniel's archived notes. The result, it was a match. Father Daniel had passed away 8 years prior. But in a suicide note, he once wrote, "I heard it the night before Clara died." Its voice did not belong to the living. And now, that voice continues to echo, not from a mouth, not from a speaker, but from the words no one dared to finish reading. A small town named Ashridge, New Hampshire. Population just over 4,000. Most live by apple farming, hunting, and livestock. A place so peaceful it doesn't even have its own police station, just a mayor's office doubling as a fire station. And then, they started to return. First was an elderly woman, with white hair, walking barefoot in the pouring rain. She stood in front of the church, knocking on the door repeatedly. When the priest opened the door, she said, "My daughter never died. She is just being rewritten." She was taken to a psychiatric hospital. No one knew who she was. Her fingerprints were not in any database. 3 days later, a 13-year-old boy walked into Ashridge High School. No one knew which grade he was in. He didn't have a backpack. His name wasn't on the attendance sheet, and no one remembered seeing him before. But when asked, he only replied, "I used to study here, in another life. I just came back to finish the ending." Within 3 weeks, 11 such people appeared in the town. A veteran. A nurse. A 6-year-old girl. A postman who went missing in 1972. And a black man dressed as if from the Civil War era. All of them said the same thing: "We were called back." Because the story needs a writer. The twist became clearer: no one actually came back to life. They were memories, personalities, untold stories. Reenacted in new bodies. The people of Ashridge panicked. Some left town. The rest chose to pretend they didn't see anything. The mayor ordered the church to be closed. But that night, the entire exterior wall of the church was covered in writing in charcoal. The sentence repeated, "Write me out of sin. Write me out of silence." A secret investigation was launched, led by an independent occult organization called Larenthia, which studied cases of mass hysteria. But after 6 weeks, the organization completely lost contact with the research team in Ashridge. The last message they sent back: "This isn't an appearance. This is editing. An invisible hand is rewriting human memory." A more horrifying twist. A Larenthia staff member found a manuscript left by the team, consisting of 147 handwritten pages. The content described how the returned ones didn't just live like normal people, they synchronized their memories with the locals. Which means, we don't remember them living here. But after a few days, we remember it as if it's real. They were once teachers, neighbors, old friends. And if you ask too many questions, you'll find your own memory is distorted. The climax occurred on a night in early autumn, when the entire town lost power. A humming sound spread through the air, like hundreds of people whispering in the gas pipes. A resident recalled, "I heard my name, my date of birth, and a memory I had never told anyone." The voice laughed and said, "Now I'm writing your chapter." The next morning, the whole town temporarily lost their voices. No one could speak. No one knew why. Only a local newspaper published a single edition with a single headline, "We cannot be silent when the story is still being written." A few weeks later, Ashridge was sealed off by the government under the name, Public Psychiatric Epidemic. No one could enter. No one could leave. But people still saw faint lights flickering from the windows. There was still the sound of a typewriter echoing from the highest hill where a deserted house stood. Inside that house, a wooden table, an oil lamp. And on the table, was the notebook that used to be in Emily Jensen's basement. The newest page wrote, "When the tongues of humanity are stripped, the ones who have been written will speak. With your own hand." In 2018, in a small bathroom at the Franklin Hotel in New York City, a woman discovered a mouth that didn't belong to her. Her name was Dr. Ellen Marwick, a cognitive psychology researcher, a professor at Columbia University. She was attending a conference on collective memory. That morning, when she bent over to wash her face, Ellen saw her reflection in the mirror didn't match her actual movements. Her mouth in the mirror was moving, while her real mouth stood still. No sound. No expression. Just a mouth speaking something. She thought she was seeing things. But the phenomenon repeated that evening. And this time, the mouth in the reflection broke into a smile. A smile wider than normal anatomical structure. It stretched up to her eyes. The edges were torn cleanly, like a pencil line. Ellen recorded in her journal, "The mouth in the mirror doesn't make a sound, but I hear it in my head. As if I once belonged to it." In the following week, Ellen noticed more signs, while brushing her teeth. She saw words faintly appearing on the steamy mirror, "We were once one." When she stood in a mirrored elevator, her face was replaced by a swirling vortex of tiny words, gathering into a mouth. She started to lose the ability to distinguish between external voices and the voices in her head. The twist began to form when Ellen decided to record a video of herself looking in the mirror. In the recording, she stood straight, silent. But her reflection was constantly moving. Her mouth opened wide. It whispered non-stop. When Ellen slowed down the video and filtered the image, each frame revealed fleeting letters around the reflection's lips. Ellen shared her discovery with a close colleague, Professor Darnell Cruz. He was an expert in spectral reflection, a theory that mirrors are places where incomplete consciousness entities are stored. He proposed a bold hypothesis. There are voices that don't need vocal cords. They just need an image to exist. And mirrors are where they find a mouth. They started an experiment. They placed a mirror in a sealed room, recording 24/7. They brought 12 test subjects into the room, asking them to describe their reflections. The results. 9 out of 12 people saw their mouths moving at a different time from reality. 4 people felt a voice learning to imitate them. 1 person screamed that, "I just saw myself screaming in the mirror, but I was smiling." Darnell recorded the data and was about to publish it. But on the day he was writing the report, he disappeared from his office. No signs of a struggle. Just a broken mirror, and behind the largest shard, was a line written in blood. Ellen was devastated. She stopped teaching. She avoided mirrors. But the strangest thing happened afterward. She started hearing a tapping sound from the other side of the mirror. Not an echo, but a real scratching sound, as if someone was trapped inside and tapping to get out. One night, Ellen woke up at 3 a.m. The bathroom mirror fogged up on its own, even though the AC was on. And the words that appeared were no longer handwritten, but typed, in the exact same font as the manuscript of The Last Whisper. The content: "The old mouth is broken. Now it's your turn." Final twist: Ellen no longer saw her own face in the mirror. She only saw another woman's face, younger, thinner, with deep, hollow eyes. She realized, that was Clara Jensen. Not an apparition. Not a haunting. But, a real reflection. Ellen cried, backing away. But in the mirror, Clara stood still, her mouth not moving. Only the final line appeared at the bottom of the mirror. When the last person looks in the mirror and sees the first person, the story is almost finished. There is a place that is not on any map, not part of any national library system. A place deep underground, mentioned in leaked documents from the Laurentia organization under the code, Archive 67X. They called it, the Library of Unspoken Names. Legend says that every soul that has been possessed, that has been rewritten and forgotten, leaves an unfinished manuscript in this space. Not paper. Not books. But breaths. Compressed breaths. Containing untold words, names never spoken, pleas for help that never reached anyone. All are sealed in glass jars, with name tags. A group of 3 people, descendants of those involved in the Clara Jensen case, followed clues from The Last Whisper manuscript, deciding to find this place. They were Noah Cruz, grandson of Professor Darnell Cruz. Mira Jensen, Emily Jensen's grandniece. Patrick Leone, a distant descendant of a priest who was burned in an 18th-century exorcism. They didn't use GPS, but a series of strange symbols encoded in the last lines of the manuscript. Step 7, read your name backward. Step 8, find the place no one has ever been called. Step 9, breathe. But do not speak. After almost a month of following the symbols, they reached an abandoned monastery in Poland, built in the 15th century, where women accused of speaking forbidden things were once executed. In the 3rd basement, they found a stone door with no handle. On it was carved a single sentence: "Whoever carries a name that has never been called, enter not through your mouth." They had to write their names in blood, dripping it into the carved groove. The door opened, soundlessly. Inside was a bottomless space, filled with mist and bone-chilling cold. No books. No shelves. Just hundreds of thousands of glass jars floating in the air, each with a carved line. Clara Jensen, 32nd breath, Elizabeth Rome, untold story, unknown host, unborn voice. Patrick accidentally touched a jar. Instantly, he heard his own voice screaming for help, but it wasn't through his ears. It echoed in his chest, a familiar voice that wasn't his. Mira found a jar inscribed, Emily Jensen, recording number 5. I never agreed. She touched it. And recalled a memory that wasn't hers, the scene of Emily hiding under a table, her chest trembling, as Clara screamed in a stranger's voice. I don't need an exorcism. I need a blank page to rewrite this memory. Noah stood still. He didn't touch any jar. He just stared at an unlabeled jar, with only the symbol. No one knew. But since he was born, Noah had always heard a whisper in his head, a female voice, light as a breath, always saying, "You are someone's story, that has not yet been fully heard." The three of them couldn't find a way out. They had to read a name aloud from the jars to open the exit door. But when Noah was about to read, Mira stopped him. If we call their names, they will no longer be memories. They will return. Patrick, panicked by the voice of his long-dead mother whispering in his heart, "Read my name. Call me back." He shouted. Eleanor Leone. Immediately, thousands of glass jars shattered. The sound was like a million voices screaming at once. No wind. No light. Only mouths, 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 appearing everywhere. On the walls. On the floor. In the air. Mouths without faces. Mouths without eyes. Mouths that only whispered. Now we will tell your story. Noah and Mira found their way out. Patrick did not. But a few weeks later, a strange man appeared at a train station in Frankfurt. He didn't know who he was. Didn't remember his hometown. He only said, "I am someone else's voice. And I am being written again." When the police took his fingerprints, they identified him as Patrick Leone. But when they called his name, the man smiled, and said, "No. I am breath number 2481. This is no longer the end. Not because the story hasn't finished, but because we have misunderstood the concept of the end." Since 2020, a series of anonymous notes have appeared on closed forums, underground literary groups, and unofficial podcasts. They are unsigned. No sources are listed. Only the same title, The Last Whisper. The content of these recordings is dreams that are not the writer's own. Memory fragments inserted into normal conversations. Names that are mentioned that the narrator never knew they spoke. And finally, whispers of unknown origin. An experimental TTS, text-to-speech, AI at Stanford University, when used to read the manuscript The Last Whisper, malfunctioned. In the middle of the run, the software automatically inserted a passage that was not in the original data. The passage was, "I have never had a body. But now, your voice is my mouth." Data showed that passage did not exist in any saved version of the manuscript. It appeared from the audio processing space of the system itself. A team of language security researchers called this the parasitic narrative phenomenon, when a storytelling structure becomes so alive that it can exist independently in the tools that transmit it. In other words, you are not telling the story. The story is choosing you to continue telling itself. And now, it doesn't need paper. It doesn't need a hand to write. It doesn't need a character. It only needs a voice. The next TTS recordings, when played, started with a soft whisper in the first 3 seconds. Not part of the text. Not static. But a name. But that name didn't belong to the person who created the recording. It changed every time it was played back. An audio engineer, Laura Briggs, decided to check the samples. She ran 25 different versions from independent TTS accounts. The results: 18 times she heard words like Mira, Daniel, Patrick, Eleanor. The last 7 times, she heard her own name. She trembled, unplugging the system. But the TTS continued to play without a power source. A female voice, matching Clara Jensen's voice from old archived recordings, whispered, "Thank you for reading me with a real voice. Now I am born again." Laura disappeared a week later. A microphone was found in her apartment, recording, though it was not connected to any device. The recording was 23 minutes long, with only one repeating phrase: "Death is an interruption. Voice is a new beginning. Let me be the last whisper." And then, that audio file started to spread. No one knew who released it first. But a podcast named The Whisper Archive appeared all over Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. No host. No intro. Just different voices, sometimes machine, sometimes human, telling the same passage. The end of each episode ended with a soft sigh. Right before the end, a sentence was whispered: "You let me speak. Now you will write." The final twist. Longtime listeners began to show symptoms of sleep writing. They wrote the names of people they had never met. They drew torn smiles. They started rereading the podcast in their own voice, even though they had never recorded it. The FBI opened a special investigation in 2023. But after a few weeks, the file disappeared from the system. A leaked video showed the person in charge of Clara Jensen's case from years ago, now over 70 years old, appearing at a press conference, holding a notebook. He said nothing. He just placed the notebook down, opening to the first line: "The last whisper is not the end. It is a signal for you to begin." The person filmed the live stream on YouTube. But when the clip ended, his YouTube channel automatically started playing the Last Whisper podcast, even though he had never posted it. And the last video he posted, before his account was deleted, was a scene of him sitting alone in the middle of the night, reading a manuscript in someone else's voice. No one knew where that passage came from. But it began with, "If you hear this, you have become the next mouth. Right." The end. Or rather, the last whisper continues. Some doors can never be shut. Some stories refuse to stay buried. And some whispers, once heard, will follow you for life. 3 scripts. 3 ways evil seeps into our world. Through a whisper. Through a third hand. And through a voice you thought was your own. If you're still listening now, ask yourself, is the voice inside your head really yours? Whisper Horror thanks you for staying with us through this journey. If you're still craving stories that were never meant to be told, stay and listen closely, because the next whisper might be calling your name.